an environmental consulting firm in Paso Robles. He uses drones to map habitats, rare plants, and other natural resources. And Kyle received his Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Cal Poly in 2006, or 16, I'm sorry.
All right, and next up is Maya O'Brien, and she received her bachelor's degree in Geography and Environmental Sciences with a minor in GIS from UCLA in 2018. Since graduating, she's interned with the city of San Luis Obispo, NASA Develop, and Esri, and currently she is working full-time as a technical consultant at Esri's headquarters in Redlands, California, and is training Esri customers, partners, and distributors. So these four GIS professionals will be who we are talking to today. If anybody has any questions for them, please feel free to message that in the chat. Grace and I will be monitoring it throughout the event. And Grace, do you want to send out the survey right now?
Yeah, we're having another event in a few weeks with Mike Ridlin from Esri, and we want to see what students are interested in him talking about. So I'm going to send a survey out to get student feedback. So if you guys could all fill that out, that'd be great.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. And yeah, let's get right into it. Grace, you want to ask the first question?
So our first question is, how did you get into GIS? Kyle, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I didn't actually train in geography. My background is in botany, mostly as a biology undergrad. And I'm just kind of like a data nerd, and my senior project had a spatial component to it. I was mapping floral morphologies across the state. So I got like a little taste of QGIS and that sort of thing. And then I worked on a grant where we used drones to map eelgrass, and that was kind of like a crash course for me. But predominantly my GIS experience has been as an environmental consultant, where like I was initially hired as a botanist, and in order to like do my job better, I just would try and figure out how to collect better spatial information and tell that like story using GIS tools. And so I'm mostly self-taught in that regard. And I've kind of like just wiggled my way into the GIS department. Like we're a small company, and so that's fortunate I was able to do it. And here I am on a GIS panel.
Awesome.
Thank you. Maya, do you want to go next?
Sure. So how did I get into GIS? I started as an undeclared social science major at UCLA. I took a geography GE my freshman year of college and just absolutely loved it. So I looked at the coursework for the geography and environmental studies major. I just loved how diverse and interesting the coursework was. So pretty much immediately switched into the major. And then my dad told me that I should take an intro to GIS class and try it out. So I loved it. And basically at the beginning of my sophomore year of college, switched into the minor. So I ended up taking 7 classes to complete the minor. And then from there, just only did GIS internships and jobs. So that's how I got into GIS.
Thank you. David, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Grace. And go Bruins, Maya. I also was at UCLA.
Woo-hoo.
I was a geography major because at the time you couldn't major in GIS. In fact, it wasn't until my senior year when the term GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, even crossed my bow. And it was because I was taking every cartography course they offered. And in a computer cartography course, which had extremely little programming in it, we were reading literature, and I read about a couple of firms that were involved with the emerging practice of geographic information systems. And one of them was Environmental Systems Research Institute, which is Esri. A lot of people don't know that. And so I, on several counts, in fact, almost every sentence so far, I'm showing my age. This is back in the mid 80s, or actually the early 80s. So I did get a job with Esri at that time. And that transition, let's say, from college to Esri just sort of put it into, let's say, the career box that's what I was in, even though I sometimes say I'm still figuring out what I'm doing. But I have, one way or the other, been involved with GIS since that transition from college to Esri in Redlands, California.
Thank you. And Nathan?
So like a lot of other people, I didn't start out looking to do GIS, and as for the previous speaker, I also, when I first started, there weren't really that many GIS courses available. I actually started out from a background in economics, but then I got a part-time job after university with the New Zealand equivalent of USGS. And through that part-time job, I got more interested in GIS, and then I actually did one of the initial university courses in GIS in New Zealand. So yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, but it is an interesting thing that a lot of people that get into GIS actually started out doing something else, whether it's environmental science or geology or statistics or all sorts of other things. And it's quite an interesting thing about GIS that it is used by so many different industries. So a lot of people come into GIS from something else.
That's a great point. I've got one question for the four of you. And my question is, what does your average day at work look like? And how do you implement GIS in your job environment? David, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. And thanks very much for that question. I'd say I can describe what my work day was like today, just to kick this off. And today I was working on a presentation that I have to give tomorrow and probably Thursday as well for some Bay Area transportation agencies, where we're discussing applying GIS practice to developing a mapping resource for the entire Bay Area transit and wayfinding interest. And it's exciting, but it's challenging because you have to explain to them not only why an approach to mapping that really touches everybody is important for them, but how GIS is able to achieve that. So I have to put together some slides that are created partially from GIS. So we put together a little project where we integrated the transit footprint of the entire Bay Area together with a 1 kilometer square grid cell, which is an approximate size of a mapping tile for the proposed mapping database. We also analyzed in the same project the density of features that are likely to appear on these maps from OpenStreetMap. And so we put that all together to create some indices that we show graphically, and use that, number one, to try to show them where these products will hit. Number two, to show them what the inputs or what the percentages of this resource might be per county across the Bay Area, and to give them some estimates about how many hours it'll take to produce this whole thing. And hopefully that'll be a presentation that they'll be able to understand, might take them to the next step, which could be a decision to do this or to try something else. That is a pretty, for me right now, that is a fairly intense day of GIS. I normally have to find more work for my firm. And so that's explaining, again, a lot about what we know about GIS. And sometimes it has nothing to do with GIS, but just mapping and data that can help transportation or planning agencies, who are our primary customers, complete the projects they want and hopefully provide their clients, which is usually their constituents, better services and make them happier. Just lastly on that point, most of what our company does right now is trying to improve public spaces for walking, biking, and transit. And so we're definitely trying to contribute to a more sustainable future, especially for our urban cores. I'll leave it there.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, David. Maya, do you want to go next?
Sure. So my average day at work, like Ethan said when he introduced me, I'm a technical consultant at Esri. So that kind of requires lots of meetings and calls to support Esri staff, as well as external folks like Esri customers, partners, and distributors, kind of for all things indoor mapping. Before COVID, I would travel a lot to customer sites to deploy Esri products. I'd also travel to other Esri offices and train staff there. It's all remote now. In the morning, it's kind of a little more similar, less variety in the traveling aspect, but just start with meetings in the day. 10 a.m. every day, our team has a sync. So it's just a 15-minute sync where we would talk about what we did yesterday, what we're planning to do today. And then if we have any roadblocks, so we can ask questions and kind of start the troubleshooting process. And then the rest of the day typically varies. So sometimes I'm in just a bunch of meetings, answering questions and collaborating. And then other days I just have my head down in customer data or doing documentation, kind of really whatever the team needs, but all with that indoor mapping kind of backdrop. So that's kind of my average day.
Nice. Very cool. Nathan, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'll start with the great things about my particular job. So one really fantastic thing that I really enjoy about what I do is that as a consultant, I get to work with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different industry sectors. So currently, for example, I am working with emergency management planning. So planning for natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, volcanoes, pandemics, all of those kinds of things. But on any given day, I might have several meetings with different clients, and I'm also, involved with forestry or local government, city government, federal government agencies, right through to assisting the native tribes in New Zealand with their interests in the land. So it's really very varied job that I have. In saying that, the unfortunate part of my job is that I'm more in sort of management level things now. So it's very rare that I actually get to play with GIS myself and do cool things with the software. But in saying that, I still need to understand all of the concepts and what's possible with the software, even if it's not me that's actually doing that work. I need to understand what tasks to give members of my team and what they can do. So that's sort of a little bit sad for me that I don't get to do that much with the actual GIS software anymore, but it's still important that I understand all of those things. And what I do with our clients is really interesting, just finding out what they need and helping them to achieve their results.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you, Nathan. And Kyle, do you want to finish it up?
Sure. Yeah. So my company also does consulting, and our primary product that we make are reports that talk about the biological resources, mostly like rare or sensitive species that will occur on a property. And like there's any number of reasons why you'd want to report like that, but the common one is you're trying to develop, for example. So today is actually a good example because I kind of straddled both of the hats I wear, which is the biologist and the GIS analyst. So I spent the first part of the day writing the actual report. Like, this is the habitats you'll find there. This is what makes them different from the other ones, et cetera, because I've already done the mapping side of it. But there's this other component, right? So that the project occurs in Santa Barbara County, and they want to know about impacts to oak trees. And so the way we're going to approach that is using some of our drone products. We've actually extracted the canopy layers from it, and then we're going to create polygons from that and then buffer them by 6 feet and then see if any project components intersect with it. So yeah, I guess what we're doing is we're telling a story, like where are the sensitive resources, what of those sensitive resources, like what will be impacted by the project, and then write that up in a report, which our client can send to the regulator to either approve or not approve the project.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for sharing. The third question we want to ask is, what is the biggest risk that you've taken in regards to your GIS career? Nathan, do you want to start?
Probably it's kind of related to my career, but it's also a personal thing, I guess. I immigrated from New Zealand and moved to the UK, which was, I was doing that for personal reasons. I had met my soon-to-be wife, but it's quite a big step in anyone's life and in your career to need to move countries, and so that was quite a big risk, and it was actually quite challenging to begin with, because there are differences in the approach in different countries. So one really good thing about working in GIS is that it's a profession that is in demand around the world and is growing around the world. So, if you do want to travel to other countries, then there are lots of opportunities to do that. GIS is actually on the shortage list for professions in New Zealand, and it was in the UK when I went there as well. So it made it easy for me to be permitted to work in the UK. It is difficult to go to a different country and to get a job straight away there. And so if you do intend to do anything like that, some of the things to think about is just the format of your resume or CV. You kind of need to find out what the expectations are in different countries. I think in the US, a resume is generally 1 to 2 pages, whereas in the UK it can be between 5 and 7, and in New Zealand it's sort of 3 to 4. So just little things like that can make quite a big difference in shifting countries. I did get work quite easily in the UK, and have also worked in Germany and Portugal and places like that. So that's one really cool thing about working in GIS, is that there's opportunities to look around the world once the pandemic's over, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Kyle, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So I haven't been in my GIS career for very long, long enough to take any big risks. But I guess what I can say to that is, I just kind of followed my interests at work. I was hired with a very specific job title, but I made it my own in a way, and I've created value in the company for that, and they haven't fired me for using their time to play with GIS. In fact, it's just only been rewarding. So I guess and the moral of that story is I don't know, follow your ideas and take chances at work. Don't be afraid to use a little bit of their time.
That's good advice. Thank you. David?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'd say I kind of echo Nathan's risk in that when I left college, my goal wasn't to get a GIS job. I got a GIS job because I was very interested in learning more about Esri at the time. And it was in my hometown. I grew up in Redlands, California, but I wanted to save money to travel. And even though I learned a lot and I was super interested in what I was learning at Esri, I kept my focus on earning enough money so I could travel. And part of that interest was I'd met a lot of people who were from foreign countries when I went to college, and more so as I was finishing my degree. I just found them so fascinating. Well, I guess their stories about where they came from. And so that's what triggered this. But one thing I did, which was a good thing, is that I had learned enough GIS and actually had worked on a project with the Swedish forestry enterprise at the time, and Scandinavia was kind of a target of mine to hopefully try to find some work to hang on during my travels for at least a few months. But that turned to multiple years. I got a job there with them. And that group I worked with, which was the data group at the Swedish National Forestry Enterprise, turned into Esri Sweden eventually. And I ended up turning down multiple jobs in Spain, other opportunities in the UK and Germany, all things that I would have said earlier, what, you turn stuff down like that? But I'd started to find a way of life I really liked in Scandinavia. So I think what started as my initial big risk in leaving a potential career there at Esri turned into something else, and I haven't regretted that.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing. Maya, have you taken any big risks yet?
I'd say not any huge risks, right? Because I'm still early in my professional career. But I will say, and I think a lot of young professionals can relate to this, the biggest risk I've taken has been relocating. So kind of similar to Nathan, but on a little smaller scale, not a different country, but moving to Redlands, California, right? I didn't know anyone there. I didn't know any of the folks on my team. It really was a leap of faith moving there, signing a year-long lease, making that kind of like multi-year commitment. Because once you have a full-time position, you're typically expected to stay about 2 years, like at least, before you could switch teams at Esri or leave the company. So relocating has been the biggest risk so far.
Awesome. Thank you. And that kind of ties into my next question. A lot of our club members are upperclassmen. They're going to graduate in a couple of years. And a lot of us are looking for career advice. And so my question to the four of you is, what's the best career advice that you have ever received? Nathan, do you want to go first?
Boy, there's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big question. So take your time. If somebody else has an answer,
yeah,
go for it.
So, so for people in your position, sort of senior students about to graduate and start looking for jobs and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Some of the key things that I would say is start now with networking with people that you meet in the industry, and you know, if you haven't got a LinkedIn profile yet, go and make one today and send connection requests to all of the speakers here today. You know, one really good thing about the GIS industry, lots of GIS professionals like helping students. You know, we think that this is a great industry, and we think that it's really important for the world and the economy and society that we have a good understanding of geography and human and geography as well. So, you know, we're all giving up our time here today to try and help you guys, and that's something that you'll find a lot of GIS professionals are prepared to do. So, you know, start making those connections, start attending events, start seeing if you can go to conferences, all of those kinds of things. The Esri you see normally in San Diego, you know, 16,000 or 18,000 GIS professionals going to that. It's just down the highway or whatever from all of you. You should try and get to it. It's amazing. But, you know, don't be shy to reach out to some of the professionals and ask them advice and ask them questions, all of those kinds of things. So that's probably a key thing. Yeah, I'll let the other speakers have a go.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Nathan. And just for everybody to know, we will be providing everybody's emails, and you feel free, like Nathan said, to find everybody on LinkedIn. This is a great networking opportunity for people to make those connections. And like Nathan said, they're really, really helpful. The GIS community is, from what I can tell, awesome. And yeah, we really appreciate the four of you being here. Maya, do you want to go on ahead and answer next?
Sure. So some of the best career advice I received, this is echoing what Nathan said, is to reach out, right? So reach out either to your professors or industry professionals, asking about job opportunities or their experiences in the field. Then when you do reach out, make sure you're prepared, you come with questions, and then afterwards follow up. So I'll give an example of how reaching out was pretty crucial for me, it turns out. So when I was an intern at Esri, as part of our onboarding process, we're given a list of good people to get to know in the organization. So with that list, I talked to some of my coworkers on the team to get more information on those people, about what those people did. Then I sent out all of them like an individual meeting invite, like one-on-one meetings. I came prepared with questions. Then after the meeting, I followed up with an email thanking them and potentially asking them more questions. So as I spent more time at Esri, those meetings led to meetings with other people whose names came up. I met people in the hallway, and then I'd like randomly send them a meeting invite later and talk to them more. And one of those meeting invites ended up being with my future manager that hired me at Esri. So I found out after I interviewed for full-time that the first 3 teams I interviewed with passed, they didn't hire me. And that person that I made the meeting invite was like, oh, they passed, we'll take her. And then they hired me. So that ended up being really crucial. So my advice was to reach out, be prepared when you do that, and then follow up afterwards for sure.
Wow, that's a great story, Maya. Thank you.
A little too precarious for my liking. Might have not gotten the job, so really important.
David, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. It's really hard for me to sift through. I've received a lot of advice. I think most of it was good advice. Maybe the best observation I've had, which wasn't direct advice, but I was fortunate enough to pick it up, is to learn to be a very good listener. A lot of people, and I'm not detracting, because I'm also a big advocate of learning how to present yourself and putting yourself out there. But sometimes more importantly is learning how to listen and hear what especially clients or people who you're doing work for are saying and what they need. I've been in so many situations where someone in advance has decided what they're going to sell and what they're going to push, or what they're going to create as far as an application or a solution to something, but they haven't spent enough time listening to what the actual problem is and what the people really need. And this is important, I think, for more things in GIS, but particularly GIS, where there's a lot of communication involved. Even if you're speaking the same language, inherently you usually have different levels of understanding, both of the problem that's trying to be solved and of the technology that's trying to solve it. And somewhere those two need to meet. And so that's a really, really important interface to learn how to work with. And there are a lot of things involved in that. It's much more than just listening, but I'm going to focus in my reply right here just to the one part that I picked up a lot on how important listening is, and that as being a part of that essential communication bond. So I'll leave it there for now.
That's great.
Can I just add one other thing? So that's great answer from David. But you know, all of you have got some opportunities which we never had sort of when we're starting out in our careers with things like social media and that kind of thing. So, you know, on LinkedIn, there's a whole lot of GIS groups and things like that you can join. Some of them, you know, are full of spam messages and people want to sell things, but it's still worth taking a look at. But there are groups such as the ERISA Vanguard Cabinet that you should definitely be checking out what they're doing, and those types of groups are much more sort of controlled and the content that they're promoting. And there's also, you know, on Twitter, there's hashtag GIS chat, which has got a lot of professionals that they sort of chat about things and that kind of thing. But if you have questions, that's another great place to raise those sorts of questions. And there are probably local branches of organisations like ERISA that you should be trying to look at and so on as well.
Yeah, that's a great addition, Nathan. Thank you. Kyle, do you have any advice that you've ever received, or career advice?
Sure. Yeah. That was all really great advice, and just at, you know, risk of repeating everyone else, I think cultivating good relationships has been like one of the best things that I have done, you know, in my few years of professional life. Not just like reaching out in a professional networking sense, but also just locally, you know, like once you do get the job, cultivate good relationships, because you have to work with these people and you never know where like one connection might lead. Like I got my current job because I had a good relationship with my professors, you know, and Lindy, my boss, was looking for someone, and you know, my advisor's like, well, here's a guy, you know, because we had that relationship. And then to build on what David was saying a little bit, listening, I think, is really important, but also be able to convey a story really well. That is something I've thought a lot since being at this company, because it doesn't matter like really what you go into. If you can concisely and clearly convey information, whether that's with a word or with maps, you know, I think of map making as like a form of writing. It takes like some clarity, then you've got a real advantage and you can add value wherever you go. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just kind of a follow-up question off of that. You mentioned cultivating relationships, good relationships. Is there a specific thing that you did to do that, to, you know, create those relationships?
Sure. Like particularly when you're in undergrad, you know, you don't have a lot of experience, but you're eager and you can be useful. So I think you should just be like hungry to like do things for people, right? And like be useful to them and be grateful that you can even help them. And I think that goes a long way to cultivating relationships with people that can connect you to other places.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was really good advice. So this is the last question that Ethan and I have planned. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat for our panelists. And our last question is, what's some advice you'd give to new grads looking for a job? Maya, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think one piece of advice that helped me a lot was to find a mentor or multiple mentors. So someone to help you with your resume, someone to talk about career options in your field. And then also once you get that internship or that full-time position, navigating work life. So like I said, these could be multiple people. So for example, I have two mentors at Esri, one more senior position, worked at Esri over 30 years. It's actually Mike Ridlin that you're going to talk to next. But he helped me a lot with my resume before my internships. And then when we were still in the office, we would meet and get lunch every so often, just to talk about the bigger things that were happening with work. So that was really helpful. And then I have another mentor. She's been at Esri only 8 years, but she is a woman and has a, you know, kind of that shared background because I do work with all men on my team. But she helps me with other things of like how to navigate certain situations at work. She gives me advice on how to advocate for myself during my year-end reviews, like things like that. So to find a mentor that kind of can help with, like I said, resume, career stuff, and navigating work. And those could be multiple people. So.
Thank you. Kyle, do you want to go next?
I think Maya really nailed it. You know, find people that can connect you to where you need to be, and I guess like don't get discouraged if things aren't working out. You know, like you are all like bright young people that can do many things, and so just, you know, keep the faith and you'll find something good.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I thinking about a couple of things. One is I've heard some young people during the pandemic saying, oh, nobody's hiring, and so they kind of just lay back and use that as a little bit of an excuse to take it easy, I think, because you can still be reaching out to those places that you'd like to work, even if they're not hiring at that time. They all read, most of them anyway, the mail that comes in, and it strikes me anyway when I read a resume from somebody or just a letter of interest saying, hey, I'm interested in what you do. I can't see that you're hiring right now, but would you consider me for the future, and then provide a little background about your interests. I think that's really important. It shows that you're eager. It shows that you're just not sitting there waiting for something to come to your plate. And I think that's really important, because that's kind of a lot of what employers are trying to figure out when they're interviewing staff and things. And I think you already have jumped a little bit ahead in that case that they do say, oh, wait, right, we're going to hire, but we have a letter or two here from some people who've already reached out, and you might be the first in line when that opportunity comes up. So don't forget that. I think as well, if you're interested in, let's say if you're having a hard time finding a job, GIS is actually an area, I think this is probably exists in other places, but you can find a lot of data collection efforts that are through nonprofits or through some of these open source projects to hone some skills or to learn some new skills and add them to your resume. And I'm not thinking of anything specific right now. I know I participated in one once upon a time with a group here in SLO where I wish I could remember the name of it, and I might be able to respond afterwards through the email to you, Grace, and you, Ethan, about this if you don't know about these themselves. But there was about 2 or 3 of these projects where you could help create data in countries that desperately need it. And someone had created a pretty simple interface using the tools with OpenStreetMap. And like I say, it's again a resume builder. It's a way to show a prospective employer in the future that you don't just sit back and wait for things to be served to you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Nathan, any advice?
Sure. So when you're looking for your job, first job, some of the things to be aware of in terms of your resume, you need to tailor your resume to every job that you apply to. So what I mean by that, you pretty much can need to rewrite your resume for each application that you're making. So look at what's in the job advertisement and kind of reword your entire resume to meet what that job advertisement is requesting. One thing that I do when I, in the past, have applied for jobs is to actually get some of the key words and key headings from the job advertisement and actually reflect those back in the resume that I've submitted. So that's one key thing. Some of the things with things like, with resumes, try and use some evidence of what you've actually done. I get a lot of resumes and a lot of them do things like they just sort of list software modules and things which you've used, but it doesn't actually say what you did with those software modules. So if I'm getting 50 resumes and they're all sort of saying the same thing, and they're all sort of saying I can use ArcGIS and I can use I don't know, Erdas Imagine and FME or some other piece of software, and if everybody else is saying exactly the same things, you kind of not. And if I have to choose, 5 people out of that 50 to interview, then you want to tell me actually what's the evidence, what did you do with that software. It doesn't necessarily have to, although things like humanitarian, OpenStreetMap, sort of things that David was talking about, those are great things to do to prove that you've achieved something. It can also be some of the things which you've done as in your assignments during your coursework. So if you have done for an assignment a particular piece of work and generated a particular result using a particular piece of software, then that's all evidence that you've achieved something or that you've applied a process. So try and think about those things in your resume. And one last piece of advice, when you get to the interview stage, I really recommend practicing an interview with somebody that you know. So if you have a neighbor or perhaps one of your parents, friends, or somebody like that who is a manager, maybe they don't have to be a GIS manager, they could be in any industry. But if you actually ask them to just practice sitting down and having an interview with you prior to doing the real interview, that is really surprising how useful that can be when it comes to the real interview in terms of making sure that you're not just practicing things like that. means that you're not as nervous when it comes to the real thing.
Awesome. Thank you all for answering that. I just wanted to let everybody know that we've got our 5th panelist just joined us a little bit late. Everybody welcome Noel Fee. Noel is a Cal Poly grad. She studied environmental management and protection and now works at the City of San Luis Obispo as a GIS specialist. So we've been getting a lot of questions from the chat, which is fantastic. Please keep that up. And the first question from Abigail and Sophie, I'm kind of combining the two, is where do you see the future of GIS going? Any areas of expansion that you see a need for in GIS or something that you're excited about in GIS? So, Kyle, do you want to go first? Start us off.
I mean, my bias perspective on this is drones are going to change the way we collect remotely sensed image data. You know, it's now possible with a few $1,000s for you to go out and create aerial imagery that's much better than what's currently available whenever you want it. And so that opens up a whole spectrum of possibilities of the kinds of questions you can answer. And that's the world that I'm hoping to explore and, be a part of. So that's, there's my answer.
Yeah, definitely. That's very cool. Nathan, do you want to go?
Sure. So there's probably some of the big things that are happening in the GIS world at the moment is things like, not sure if you all would have heard of the Internet of Things or IoT. Basically, what that means is all of the sensors that are everywhere now. They're in your mobile phones, they're in traffic sensors, they're in flood gauge sensors, they're in pedestrian sensors, they're in your houses, they're everywhere. And all of those sensors have a location. So there's basically a tsunami of data which is being generated by all of these sensors. So that's dealing with all of that data and interpreting it. That's one thing which is critically important. And alongside that, integration with all of those sensor systems and things like that, or integration with other systems in general, is a big thing that's happening with GIS at the moment. So understanding some of the ways that data flows from some of those sensor systems into GIS, those are all important things that are happening at the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Noel, do you want to give it a
Yeah. I definitely want to second what Kyle said about drone use, and then also add the use of Python and Java and some other script language has been really useful and kind of up and coming, at least with the city of SLO. So to kind of automate map making and make it more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. Maya, do you want to go next?
Sure. So like I said earlier, I focus more on indoor mapping. So that's something that's Esri developed that released a few years ago to automate the process of bringing in building data into GIS. And then once it's in GIS, we can do all this analysis on top of it. So, and for example, this year, really been a bigger kind of push because of COVID. So having these indoor spaces mapped in GIS, and you can use all your other standard GIS tools and other things. For example, seeing where people are in real time in a building. So are there too many people in a room? If so, how can we send an alert and get that alert in real time? So that's been the focus of my work here at Esri. And then especially with COVID this year. So kind of bringing GIS indoors. So it's not just that blank polygon that we'll typically see of a facility outline. So that's for me.
Yeah, I'm sure that indoor mapping is, very, very important right now in the current state of the world. And David, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I'll kind of reiterate some of the other panelists that data has always been critical in GIS, and I'm so old in the game that when I started, we had to create the data, and there was a lot of digitizing going on and so forth, and I won't draw you through that. But the problem today is, as Nathan's saying, it's a tsunami of data. But the job is the same insofar as we have to be able to tell first if it's good or not. And with a tsunami coming at you, that's super challenging. So you have to decide what you need it for, how to filter it. It's not a bad idea to take some courses in data science if you haven't already latched onto those. I'm not that familiar with the, let's say, the curricula within data science programs, but I think someone with spatial skills could probably latch onto those pretty quickly and make a lot of good use out of it. So I'll leave it with that. Study the data, make sure it's good for the purpose that you want to use it for.
All right, thank you all for that. I'm going to combine Julia and Jackson's next question. It's about grad school. So what are your opinions on grad school? And do you think getting a master's degree or PhD is common and a good idea for your field of work?
Well, I'm like currently applying for grad school, so I'm very curious what the rest of the panel thinks. I, think it's a good idea. It gives you some expertise and some more standing, to fight that imposter syndrome a little bit. But I'm curious what everyone else has to think.
Thank you, Noel. You've had your master's degree, right?
Yep, I got my master's. And yeah, I don't think I could recommend it more. I really happy I went. Gives you real world experience, especially when you get a funded research project. Like if you can go to grad school and pay nothing, which is what I did, and you can work and basically work on your thesis and get a degree out of it. And yeah, I wouldn't go like if you just want like a resume builder, but if you're really interested in research or environmental management, GIS, yeah, I couldn't recommend it more. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. David, do you have a master's?
I actually don't. I did postgrad work in GIS at UC Riverside, but at the time, because there was very little in the way of academic training in GIS, and so that fortunately was close to where I was working at Esri in Redlands, California, and they had a few courses all in their graduate department. I don't even think they had a degree in GIS at the time. It was probably in their geography program. And then when I was in Sweden, I'd probably done more coursework than even if I had chosen to do a PhD. It's just I was never going for a degree. There I was doing work in forestry because I needed it for the types of applications I was involved with in Sweden. I still recommend people to get the graduate degrees as long as they feel inspired to do that. And I think in 99% of the cases I know of with professional workplaces, they help you get better pay. I think a lot of they just get you to the front of the line quicker for the interviews and so forth. Well, once you're in the job, then you have to prove yourself always. And that's the way it should be. But I think they're important to move you ahead and probably to get some training that some people say, oh, I'll go and work for a while and wait. Okay, some people are diligent and good about returning back to school, but some don't. And so I think if it makes sense, you've got it on your list, in your scope, you've even got a program in mind, go for it. It's a good idea.
Thank you. I'm also going to add on to this question because Milo just put it in the chat for you, Nathan. I'm probably going to ask you again, Noel. Do you recommend going to grad school straight after graduation or getting some experience first and then going back to school?
I would recommend getting some experience first because that's where you really learn what you're interested in. I went to undergrad for environmental management and then I was a biologist for like 5 years. And during that time, I really realized like, oh, I love plants and I love wetlands and that's what I want to study. And so that's when I started to reach out to professors and was like, do you have funded research in wetlands? And that's like all I said. And I had a couple professors saying, yeah, this is funded, apply, because they saw that I was driven and I knew what I was interested in. and the professor will notice if you're interested in something, that means you will help them get published. And so maybe you have a better chance of, getting into a program or finding a project that you're really interested in. So yeah, I would definitely recommend getting work experience under your belt.
Nathan?
So I agree with what Noel said there, but the thing that I would sort of add to what everybody else has said is that one of the great things about GIS is that it is such a broad and varied discipline, and there are so many different paths that you can take in your career, which kind of can make it confusing as to what to do and when to do it, which is obviously why you're all asking these questions. But I do think it is important that you consider all of the options, and grad school is just one of those options. There are other types of training and other paths that you should consider depending on what you want to do. So some of those other paths are, for example, there's the Esri certifications that, if you want to be really good at using Esri software to do things, or other vendors' software have training courses as well, then you can take those certifications as another option. And in some cases, it might be cheaper to do that or faster to do that. Or if you want to, so I think it was Noel that mentioned about things like Python scripting. So, you could elect to take some more IT focused courses, whether that's at grad school or through a different mechanism. And then there's things like the GISP from ERISA, which that's sort of more around work experience and so on. Or if you want to do what I did, I focused more on project management and business analysis, and that's sort of more of the business side of GIS. So, as Noel said, I think it's a good idea to get some work experience and figure out which avenue you think suits you best and which is going to meet your needs. But just sort of be aware that there are those options, and it is quite confusing as to which one you want to take. So maybe getting some work experience to be sure of which of those paths you want to take is a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great response. Thank you, Nathan. You mentioned getting like Esri certifications, and that made me think of a offset question. Maya, you might be a little bit biased for this, but I was wondering about your use of Esri software versus open source software like QGIS, and if you use that in your workplace, and if you see, a use in learning both or just one.
Are you asking me? Or
no, I was just saying that because you work at Esri, you might be a little bit biased.
Oh, yeah. Once I came to Esri, it was kind of ArcGIS Pro or nothing, just because the product that I'm working on only is supporting ArcGIS Pro. So I haven't had much experience elsewhere.
Kyle, do you use Esri software, open source?
Yeah, so I have a Mac, so I started with QGIS, and I think it's a great program. It does a lot of good stuff, but I now use ArcGIS Pro at work, and I really have come to love it. I think it's a good product. I think both, like having some experience in both is good, particularly if you don't have access to all the licenses that Esri offers, because pretty much all the tools available, at least the common ones that you have to pay a little bit more for in Esri is available in QGIS. So sometimes a little switching if the budget doesn't allow, but if I could just live in Arc, I would.
David, what about you?
Yeah, we're fully within the Esri development framework right now. It wasn't always that way, even though going further back in history, a lot of you probably have never heard of ArcInfo. That was a a product family from Esri many moons ago. In fact, eons ago. But we use it a lot, and we got a lot out of that. And it was what you used at the time, and it was awesome. The open source stuff emerged later. And right now we do use QGIS, and we have used QGIS for some pretty big projects. And so I'm glad it's there. It's we contribute to the project. The open source projects, I think, are very worthwhile. But right, if you've got the opportunity, but for us, if we're driven more by our clients to develop in the Esri platform, it's an incredibly rich. So in fact, it's so rich, there's really nobody that I've met who's an expert in the full breadth of it. You usually become fairly niche or know how to apply parts of it to what your main area of concern is. But at this stage, it's so enormous. Sometimes people can ask, can't I only spend a small amount and license the part that I use? That's kind of always been the question with Esri, but they've made a great business out of selling you much more than you're ever going to need. So I'll leave it there.
What you said, David, reminds me when I was an intern, they told us, never on your resume put that you're experienced in the ArcGIS platform, right? Experience in everything. We'll sniff that out immediately. So
they'll just laugh at you, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we've got one other question from Kira in the chat, and she asked, what was a GIS related question that you faced during a work project, and how did you solve it?
Conflict, not question.
What's that? Oh,
conflict, not question.
You wanna start off with that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. So what was a GIS related challenge that you faced during a work project, and how did you solve it?
I gotta think about this. Does someone else want to start?
Yeah.
I can shoot for one. I actually gave an example in my first response this evening, but I'll go for another one. I'll try to make this brief because it's hard. Once I was part of a team, this was in Sweden, that was coordinating a planning effort to put all of the distribution, or to create a new distribution backbone for electricity in the south part of Sweden, completely underground. Everything had been overground up until that point. And so this was figuring out where all the transmission lines that were feeding it had to feed into this one, and above all, how the path was going to go so that it could actually get done. This is about a 200-kilometer stretch that was passing, I think it was about 3,000 landowners, umpteen different rivers and streams. It was crossing rails, roads. It had to avoid a lot of other, especially archaeological sites, because Sweden is quite aware of its archaeological treasures, and they have those all in a database with an API, so you could get at that. And so I, together with some others who were on our project team, put together a strategy to get a bit of a data hub, where all the consultants would be contributing their data. So all the archaeologists, all the geologists, the field crews, the land records people, everybody would be putting it most importantly, so we could all view it kind of in the same environment, and not one set of professionals having to show their maps or diagrams and another showing theirs, which would look inherently different. It would be hard for the public to look at, because this project inherently was a public outreach effort as well, to tell the landowners why they didn't need to worry about the power line going under their property, or indeed to bring up alternatives to how this could go. And so it didn't feel that, how do I say, like a science fiction solution, but at the time it was, in a way, because they had just never seen this amount of information coordinated in the same environment. And so it was quite powerful and fun to see that help the project, which was able to get done. That was cool.
Nice.
Awesome.
I can add one. Working as a GIS specialist with the city of San Luis Obispo, you work with all the departments, many different staff, and some of which don't even know how to use a computer, or, you know, I had one coworker that's called the mouse flotation device on the screen. And so a tough part of my job is sometimes like collecting the data, but also teaching others how to collect the data. Just being able to explain different apps like Survey123, or like any other app that we could put on a tablet for them. And that's been a tough part of the job, but yeah, just having patience really helps. And yeah, being able to work with lots of different people and helps as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Noel. Maya, do you have an answer to this question?
Yeah, so kind of a common, you know, kind of GIS problem, I would say, or at least here, like my role as a technical consultant, one of my managers, he'll write proposals for customers and say, yeah, we can do X, Y, and Z for you. We'll do it in 3 months, not a problem. And then he gives the proposal to me and my other, like, you know, coworker who's technical, and we'll have to figure out how to do it. You know, they won't always consult with you, whether it's possible. So this year we did a really gnarly project, which was all about kind of COVID-19 response and recovery using indoor mapping. And, you know, there's like different products at Esri and we know how those things work, but for this specific project, it's like, how are we pulling all these things together and using it all together in a way we haven't before, even though we know there's isolated capabilities. So bringing all those things together. So, and the way we solved it was lots of collaboration. Me and my coworker, we met, you know, every other day to update on progress, and then really leveraging your network of people that you've met at your organization that have specialties in those different things. Because like we've kind of said, it's really impossible to get the full breadth of GIS kind of experience. So bringing different resources in as necessary to accomplish that project. And we did it, even though it was, yeah, definitely daunting.
Okay, shall I add another story? One example of a particularly difficult GIS problem which I worked on in the past was setting up a geocoding engine. Nowadays, there's a lot of geocoding engines and services that you can just consume straight off an API and that kind of thing. But this was prior to all of those things existing. So addressing street addresses are quite a difficult data set to work with, and there's lots of issues that you get with street addresses. If people spell a street name incorrectly, or if they get the zip code sort of one digit incorrect, which is quite a common thing. If people are typing in details, they typing in things, you can make those kinds of mistakes. So trying to set up things to match street addresses in a client data set with a master data set is a very complex process, really. So to approach that type of problem, you need to first understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. Then you need to look at the data sets that you have available to you and work out if they're going to be suitable or not. And sometimes, the perfect data set, you just can't get it, or you need to make it yourself. But a lot of times you actually have to work with the best data that you can get, and then work out how to deal with the issues with that data. So some of the approaches that I took with building a geocoding engine was to start with a plan, and I actually wrote down the process and put it in a diagram for myself, and then started prototyping steps in the process to see if they would resolve these types of matching issues. But always making sure that I could go back a step and go back to the data from the previous step, or go back 3 steps if I discovered that I'd gone down a dead end with working out this process. And then, also, as well as having the steps, you also need to know what your target output is going to look like. So a mixture of having a plan for how to do those things, but you need to be able to adapt that plan, and taking some prototyping steps. So the sort of process that I developed for that, it ended up having probably 100 different steps in the process to get a good geocoding result. So that's a really complex GIS problem, and sometimes I'd recommend putting it on paper. I know we've all got computers and those things these days, but this is why we have whiteboards and that kind of thing to work all of those things out.
Yeah, fantastic answer, Nathan. Thank you very much. Kyle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, those are excellent projects. Particularly like David, that geo database with all the clients, man, that sounds so nice, because we work on some big projects where it's just emails back and forth, and that can get a little frustrating. But sort of like what Nathan was saying, but like a much smaller scale, whenever we like start a new report, we have to assess the potential for rare species to occur there, like plants or animals. And so that is like a routine search. You like look within 9 quads of like a few key databases, and then you create a table of like what are the potentials there. And it can be like quite manual and like repetitive. And I originally built like an automated tool in QGIS because I didn't have the advanced license yet. But then just like one day it just stopped working. And so I've recently migrated to ARC, and it's so far working really well. And just to piggyback on what Nathan said, like if it's just floating in your head, it can get really, becomes very clouded and not easy to see. But just having a simple diagram, in particular, knowing what are your endpoints, like what are the actual products you want to make, and like where you're starting with, and then trying to figure out the middle part. You can iterate through that, and just a lot of testing and stuff. And it saves a lot of time, and it helps the biologists a lot, because now, before, when they had just like an Excel spreadsheet with hundreds of rows of like different occurrences, like there's a kit fox seen here on this date or whatever. And now it's like an interactive web map, and they can zoom to the feature and like see it in context and add other layers like soils, and actually take advantage of what GIS offers, which is bringing all of these spatially on their own, like separate layers of information, bring them together, and then making comparisons and like actually deriving insight from that. And it's, I think, helped everyone there, and it's been a fun project for me to work on.
And thank you for sharing that, Kyle. So we're going to wrap things up now, but I just wanted to say again, thank you so much to our panelists for taking times out of your busy schedules to join us here today. I know myself and the rest of the GIS students have really appreciated your advice and loved hearing all of your stories. We've left all of your contact information here in case students had further questions or wanted to make a new connection in the professional field. I know you've all mentioned students are more than welcome to reach out, which we really appreciate. And again, I'm going to put the link to the survey that one of our GIS students, Milo, made about what, Ethan just did, about what our talk in a few weeks with Mike Ridland from Esri should be about. And if anyone wants to hang around, chat with Ethan, or if any of the panelists can stay for a few minutes, more than welcome to.
Let's give a round of applause, everyone, for our panelists. Thank you again for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This is great.
Yeah, thanks so much for organizing this. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was
Thanks,
fun.
guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for having me, and thanks to the other panelists. It's always interesting hearing what everybody else has to say.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you for joining us on your COVID-free holiday, Nathan.
Yeah, Nathan, I'm completely impressed you're joining us on your holiday. That's well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, in some ways, it's kind of an interesting and enjoyable to, listen to what all of you have to say, and it's also, nice to give something back, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, I might go and see what the surf's doing, and yeah.
Get back to your holiday now. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, stay in touch, and
Take care.
Thanks for the invitation. Cheers.
Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.
Good stuff, Nathan. Bye now.
Kyle, I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. I'm Jack, who was working with Ella this summer on her mistletoe project.
Oh, Jack, how you doing, man?
I'm good, good. Yeah, I saw your name and wanted to make sure I said hello.
Did you get the image like rectified and everything processed?
Yeah, eventually. There's still
Nice.
some hiccups in that project, but yeah, I got that step figured out.
Cool. How's the project going?
It's pretty good. We're at a bit of a standstill after we got the latest round of drone imagery, but
Sure.
It's looking good. We got some different sort of avenues to try out, see what happens.
Cool. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for introducing yourself, man.
Yeah, anyway,
Nice
just
to your
wanted to
face.
name to the face. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jack.
thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Jack.
Yeah.
Feel free to email me if you need any more help with the drone stuff. All right, probably
I
lost me.
definitely will. Thanks, Kyle.
Good.
Awesome. Okay, I think it's just all of us. So thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. Grace and I really appreciate you coming. I'm sure a lot of our members took off a lot of information. Oh, I'm gonna stop recording. So stop